Thank you for listening to the If You Market podcast. I'm your host, Sky Cassidy, and joining us today to talk about building buyer and influencer relationships is Jaxson Khan. Jaxson is the head of marketing at Nudge.ai. That's a relationship intelligence platform that helps businesses find and grow the right relationships to drive revenue. Jaxson also serves as a host of Ask AI podcasts. He's a mentor with Techstars, a judge at Venture for Canada, an advisor to Century Initiative, and a member of the World Economic Forum, among many, many, many other things. You'll have to go look at his LinkedIn profile to get everything. Jaxson has quite a long, impressive resume there. Jaxson, thrilled to have you on the show today. You ready to get started?
Thanks, Sky. I'm really excited. Excellent.
Sorry, I had to cut your bio short. That you've just accomplished way too much. I think a couple other things maybe worth mentioning here. One of Canada's top 20 under 20. Please tell me you're not still a top 20 under 20. You're over 20 now, right?
No, that was a few years ago. But my goal has always been, how do I help my community around me? And that's just been just as important as, how do we build companies? And I think ultimately, I really hope that whether it's in marketing or otherwise, that we can always really be supportive of each other and, work towards building a lot better world to live in. And I think that we, often have actually a pretty unique responsibility as marketers, because we often shape, the messages and the campaigns and the movements that really drive forward conversations that happen. So that's definitely what I'm up to now. And I'm really, really excited to be doing that, in business relationships here at Nudge now.
Excellent. So how did you get into B2B marketing specifically? I mean, you've done so much, you've got so many things going on. What was your path through to business marketing?
Yeah, I know. Sometimes people hear about me doing grassroots nonprofit stuff. They're like, how did you become a marketer for one of these software companies? I mean, my story in a nutshell would be, number one, always really passionate about, how do I build and mobilize a community of people? For me, that's been on everything from early days in university. That was all about education. How do we get more out of that for the community? And now, in the industry, I've been really passionate, about growing great companies, especially ones that I think are really, I hate to overuse the word disruption, but I'd just say changing the nature of how the game is being done. The last company I was at was called Influitive. It's one of sort of the pioneers of a new brand of marketing called advocate marketing. And it's something that I really resonated with, because I could see, that whether you're a large company like Coca-Cola, or whether you're a big business company like Microsoft, who I also briefly worked with, you're often powered by people who love your brand, you love your product. Someone, with a passion for advocacy and things like that, the idea just really resonated with me, that you can really truly have fans, and that is the best organic marketing that you can have. I jumped into them because I really wanted to, help more companies, more organizations build movements. And now here at Nudge, we're also trying to change the game around how do companies build relationships, long-term relationships with their customers, with their investors, with pretty much anything around your brand. I'm really passionate about this whole idea of, whether it's the latest technology like AI or machine learning, how are we really serving to augment human potential and human interactions, not just serving up the latest ads or optimizing campaigns or something like that. I think there's a real opportunity to combine all of those things. And so, I really like to think that I became a marketer in this field because I want to marry my twin passions of advocacy and human connection with I'd say, a true geeky obsession with the latest technology.
Right. So can you tell me a little bit more about what Nudge does there? And do you refer to it as Nudge or Nudge.ai?
We use them both interchangeably. I think Nudge is definitely an easy, colloquial way to do it. It's a verb. Nudge.ai, I'd say, is our formal name. We definitely want to make sure that, that's clear. That being said, Nudge doesn't really consider ourselves, we're not just saying, we're walking around saying we're just an AI company. We really think that AI is definitely what's forward thinking right now. But eventually, saying that you're an AI company will be like saying we're a mobile company or we have a mobile app. At one point, that was the new and latest thing. But what we're doing,
I guess the domain AI saved you probably a couple $1 million on getting a .com of Nudge.
Yeah, those top level domain .com names, as you know, pretty much went out with the first .com boom. So yeah, I think it was it's a cool way to distinguish ourselves. It's definitely not the foremost part of our identity. I think the biggest part of Nudge is we have a vision around companies being able to use relationships to grow their businesses. The AI is a huge component of that. We don't think AI either or robots are going to replace what I'd say is probably our primary use case right now, which is helping sales, helping customer success build and grow relationships. What Nudge wants to do.
What I'm worried about is you're not building a marketing terminator, basically.
We're trying not to. No promises.
No promises. Yeah. There's always
no. Like we want AI to be able to augment the average salesperson, and we want to help them spend less time grinding it out, making dial after dial, sending out cold email after cold email, and just really not hearing back. Not being able to have a personalized, real relationship with someone. And we think that's the part of sales that it's often called the grind or the hustle. But I wonder, like, haven't we had enough of hustle? Right now, we're over-indexing on it so hard. There's so much competition out there, and we've got machines that are helping us send thousands of these emails, making robo dials. But I think we're all really over-indexing on that. And Nudge wants to help us put a hold on that hustle and try a different approach. So Nudge is about how can you personalize your outreach, for sure, and using sort of the latest AI insights we're pulling in from hundreds of thousands of content sources a day to give you the latest insights on your contacts. That's probably the first way we want to help. The second is, can we actually help you not have to reach out cold? We're going to systematically map all your relationships, the ones that you can get to.
So still get that work done, just get it done in a smarter fashion, kind of.
Exactly, a smarter fashion, a way that's more effective, a way that's more human. We're gonna pull in and scrape all the opt-in data you give us. We're not Cambridge Analytica either, but we're gonna pull in email, phone, calendar, anything in Salesforce, so your CRM, marketing automation, basically like every touch point that you'd have with a customer.
Right.
This is super useful for businesses that are trying to sell to other businesses, because there's often a longer relationship cycle. It often takes a long time to kind of build a relationship with the buyer, really pull someone in. It's often a more complex deal. There's a lot of people involved. And so I think very much from the start, getting a warm introduction from someone who actually knows the other person, we're going to pull in all that information and measure your relationship strength with your connections. And even further, if you have people collaborating with you on Nudge, we can actually measure their relationship strength, which is pretty cool.
Right. Excellent. So that's.
But, in practice, I just want to say, that actually means you and I, Sky, might be connected on LinkedIn by say 100 people, but we have no idea how strong those connections are. LinkedIn doesn't really measure that. It's only when you really add each other. Whereas if I'm pulling in all your communication data, email, phone, calendar, in-person meetups, the places you really have conversations, we can actually measure the relationship strength that your connections have with potentially your target accounts, your prospects,
so
people
you can score the interaction, kind of.
Exactly.
So it's not just I connected with this guy 5 years ago on LinkedIn. We've never spoke since,
exactly.
But we've been liking each other's posts and we're following each other and we email each other and all that kind of good stuff.
Yeah, and we have some level of sort of directionality and quality metrics there too. If you and I have a one-to-one email exchange going back and forth, there's longer messages there. The frequency's high. Obviously, that's going to be a positive indicator that we probably have a good or stronger relationship, versus if I'm just spamming out 5,000 people at once with my, automated sales blaster.
Yeah. So would you say that you guys are kind of measuring internal intent data? The intent data from the actual interactions between people? Yeah.
So the goal is, can we measure both a mix of internal and external signals? So, external, that's going to include social, news, other buying signals like that. Internal, it's going to be kind of any of those interactions that you're able to feed into the system. I want to be clear, we're not reading people's emails. We consider that at this point to be definitely sort of a privacy violation, particularly of the other person as well, if they don't opt into that. But if we're just looking at the metadata of your emails, of your contact, measuring things like character count or how many people were on the message, when was it sent, how much do you talk back and forth? That's kind of always privy to both parties and pretty easy to look at. And it's really just, again, providing you a directional sense of how strong is the relationship, where is it going? Unfortunately, some of the things we can't read right now are things that are like encrypted communications, right? Texts, messages, things like that. But we may be able to do that at some point. Again, if it's kind of opt-in, and if we kind of have that access to whatever other systems people want to plug into it. So.
Yeah, I imagine managers, just thinking about being able to look at a team and seeing, okay, you have this many active contacts, but how many of them actually interact with you, kind of, and to what extent would be a pretty valuable thing.
Well, I think one of the coolest parts, maybe the third biggest thing we're doing is, I mean, we are helping sales management actually evaluate at the account level or even at the individual level or at a company-wide level all the relationships they have in play. So if you've got a bunch of deals that you forecast in your pipeline, a lot of people talk about deal forecasting, things like that, but what if we actually said we're going to give you a heavy, real, precise, granular measurement of relationship strength for all the people that you care about? We could actually tell you which deals might slip. We could tell you which deals are at risk. And I think for a lot of people, like we're hearing, that's maybe one of the biggest pain points in the market right now, is not really having a sense, because it's either relying on your reps logging data, or even if you have automated data logging, it's like, are you actually getting the insights, the analytics, the depth, the breadth, those kind of metrics that you really care about? So not just looking to do that for sales management, for sales administration, anybody who wants to make sure that they can have as many deals reliably closing as possible, not to mention, the rep coaching aspects there too.
Right. I imagine if you applied this to the consumer market, you could tell people if the people they think are their friends are really their friends. Basically, you could score people's friends. Yeah.
Jenny's my best friend. Oh, you guys only talk once a month. I mean, we'll try not to cause any breakups. Yeah. We'll try not to, break up any friendships either. But I do think, personally, like I actually got into Nudge because I started using it to track all my personal relationships and my network. So there was a huge networking component. Even at the time, like I was actually tracking my relationships with journalists and influencers. So there's so many different opportunities to use it. Obviously, with relationship intelligence, we thought the first major commercial application here, and one of the biggest pain points, is for sales. It's such a vast industry. There's so much change happening, and we think the relationships needs to be a bigger element, bigger part of it. But also, I mean, we've got founders, recruiters, investors on the platform, anybody who are looking to manage complex relationships over time. And I think that, the fact that we've got a great product, one that integrates kind of everywhere. And even there's a free version if you just want to use it for some basic networking. I mean, I think it's all helpful if people want to manage that kind of thing.
Very cool. We don't usually spend this much time on the company, but I'm just kind of interested in what you guys do there. We're gonna transition to the subject real soon here. Again, that's building buyer and influencer relationships. But it's just really fascinating what you guys do. But being able to score those relationships, just mentally for me, being able to look at it and say, oh, you could tell me which one of my people I'm neglecting. Not just, oh no, I can see in the CRM that I touched this guy in the last week or month or whatever it is, but you can kind of score how strong your relationship is with somebody, how much interaction you actually have. That is pretty cool. That's a nice thing. I'll have to check that out. So thank you for the info on Nudge. Now, let's get into building buyer influencer relationships. Can you tell me a little bit more about that and kind of your expertise and angle there?
Sounds good. So I'd say building influencer relationships is something I've been thinking about for a while, at least the last few years. The reason is I think it's, especially in a crowded market, when we talk about an influencer, I mean, it's really just someone who, is going to have, I'd say, even a ripple effect in that environment. Some of the people are certainly going to listen to.
Right. The Khloe Kardashian or the Kim Kardashian of a space, kind of. Who can you?
Yeah, for sure.
Connect yourself to. That's going to get you greater exposure.
Hopefully, with more substance. That's the ideal. but and no silicone. But I do think that ultimately, in the B2B environment and enterprise, people are looking for substance. They're definitely looking for value. I think it's a way that people make business decisions. I've had a really interesting time learning about what influencers care about too in this environment. I mean, someone like a Kim or a Khloe Kardashian, you can pay these folks thousands of dollars, even millions, to go and promote your product. And it's kind of a pay for play, right?
Right. They're professional influencers is all they are. And one of the things, and getting back to how you got into B2B marketing, one of the through lines I see on most people that get into B2B marketing is the fact that there's some value, that it's marketing with value. It's not just, here's a face that people recognize and we're going to buy it. You have to actually have a good product. You have to actually be giving value to customers, and it's a lot more fun to market that kind of product.
Yes,
I think.
Exactly. I really think that people here need to see in content that there is clear value. They need to see the connection to their work. I think a lot of B2B influencers, certainly there's a lot of paid media arrangements with them. and sponsorships. We work with at least one or two a year who we work with to sort of amplify our brand or help educate our customer base, pull in their expertise. But for a large part, I mean, there's a lot of influencers who simply want to make sure that they've got good information, good attention for their audiences. And I think a lot of times, if you want to work with an influencer, it really is about how do you build a relationship with them.
Yeah, the paid part. I mean, these people are, they're real living people, and they need to get paid for their work still. I'd say some influencers, some of what they do is just because they are giving value to their customers. But most of the time, if you go to an influencer, you're not just going to say, "Hey, I like you. Can you, give me a whole bunch of valuable exposure because I'm great?" Like, they're probably, they write things up, they speak, stuff like that. If you really want to get in front of them, that's what they get paid to do. Now they provide value with it too. Again, they're not just showing up because they're popular or something like that. They have to actually know what they're talking about and whatnot. But yeah, typically if you want to, to access one of these influencers, you're gonna pay them for it. You're gonna pay to be involved in their sphere to get their exposure.
I think if any company wants to have a continued relationship, continued brand with an influencer, I definitely think that probably sponsorship partnerships going to come into play with it at some point. I think a lot of influencers, definitely are open to featuring people, to engaging with them. I think in either instance, like the key part is how do you build a relationship? How do you make sure that you're providing value to them? I think that these people,
right?
People like, for example, like Brian Burns or Jill Rowley. I mean, they in the B2B environment, really understand value. They really critically sort of appraise the products, the companies that they want to work with, that they think are really interesting because they have an audience. They have an audience of people who trust them, who care about what they have to say, and so they know that the onus is on them to continue to prove that own value themselves to that audience. And for us at Nudge, or beyond in the work kind of that I've been involved in, I have continually kind of seen that if you're able to build a relationship with an influencer over time, it's far more likely that you'll have a chance to work with them, or a really interesting way to do so. Sometimes influencers will only choose to partner with one brand at a time in a particular area, a particular vertical, particular toolkit, which I think is really interesting, right? Influencers definitely form alliances. They care a lot about who they're associated with. They know it's representative of their brand, and they know that their brand is them, them as a person as well, right? And so they really, really, I think, care about and value what they're associated themselves with.
And I think the word that keeps coming up is value. And sometimes that is, oh yeah, you can have them come and speak at your company or whatnot, or represent you in some fashion for a monetary value. But if you're bringing other value to them, they're also businesses and parts of businesses, and they need all kinds of value. So you can't just come at an influencer and ask them to give to you. You've really got to be giving to them because, they have a lot of people coming at them all the time, and their time is valuable. You've really got to bring value, just like they bring value to their people. Kind of, there's a value pyramid there, and they need you to be bringing a lot to the table if you're going to take up their time.
Yes. And I really think that a lot of influencers will make that decision quite quickly. I think what, I've been wanting to help purvey over a time is, a basic framework to actually engage with influencers. I think, the basics of that are, number one, you got to personalize your outreach to them and make sure that you're actually really considering who they are. Number two would be, how do you actually really keep abreast of what news is surrounding them? And they often have big announcements, things like that. I think number three is, you often want to try and simplify or level out the power dynamic between you. I think one of the easiest ways you can do is sort of becoming an influencer yourself, being a thought leader yourself. I think there will more clearly be a beneficial partnership for the both of you. You've got something to offer. You've got your own following too, and those are some of the basic.
Join the club.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yep. So I'm wondering. It dawned on me. I mean, just for this podcast, inviting people sometimes. I realized you talk about the personal interaction, and in B2B marketing, that's really big because it is a small world. It's not like consumer where you're just putting up a billboard, and the fact that we're all marketers, you can't trick somebody into thinking it has to actually be a personal interaction. It's because that's what we all do and think about all the time. So you kind of recognize the fake personal interactions, and it actually is worse than just sending out a canned message.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I think that the effects and the nature of personalization is almost magnified when you're dealing with people again who get so much outreach, like just unbelievable amounts of inbound. And so I would say, you kind of know when you've got a relationship with one of these influencers. Very much often, like I'd say the pinnacle of that is, you're literally texting back and forth and you can have a call with them pretty frequently. That's kind of the way we find ourselves and Nudge with kind of our relationships with some top influencers. I think, it was funny. I give a presentation on this once with more on the journalist side, but I said, I think I know I have a relationship with the journalist based on how late in the day I can get food with them. So it's either, I can get lunch with them, I can get an afternoon beer, get a coffee after work, or, it's like 9 p.m. late night Thai food. So I think, just like,
right.
They don't have to be your best friend, but it's, do you genuinely have an interesting relationship with them? Do you think that you provide value to them that, then helps inform their job, their work, their content? Do you actually learn about them as a person? That's how I think you really start to form your own circle of influence, right? It's just like a circle of friends in a lot of ways. It's, people you think you have trusted relationships with, people who would vouch for you, people who really have you on their radar. And I think if you offer these people access and even more status, feeling of belonging, you really make them feel special in their interactions with you. I mean, that's how I think you really start to develop that circle and that relationship.
So, I mean, I guess this is where Nudge.ai maybe comes back in. If you use Nudge and you can really tell if you actually have a relationship with an influencer or not, it'll just tell you, right?
Yeah, exactly.
It'll say, here's your score.
I measure like a whole list of influencers. I'm like, okay, I gotta get back in touch over there.
Yeah. You think this person's a connection with you, but no, you being at their front door with a Starbucks in the morning doesn't make them your friend.
No, exactly. I mean, I really think that influencers need
they've got to actually invite you to dinner.
Exactly. And I think that you've got to stay on top of these folks because they've got so much going on. Everybody's asking them to get involved. People like, John Barrows, Morgan Ingram, those guys are traveling all the time. And I think, you really need to make sure that you're sticking out to them, that you're providing value again, and also that their time is limited. And I think that, the further ahead that you can give them notice if there's something that does matter to you, I think that they'll often very much give you consideration and give you a chance to work with them and to get in with them. But you really just got to, make sure that they know about it. I think you continually ping them. I almost think you need to treat an influencer relationship, or at least the first part of it, with almost the level of care that you would offer a sales deal. It's like, how do you surround sell them? How do you offer them references? How do you offer them social validation? How can you exemplify that you're the right person to do this with? And I really think that people need to approach their, influencer connections with that level of care, with that level of thought, with that level of trust, if they ever want to get there.
And I guess I'd say also, you mentioned travel. One of the things that I tell people, if you're going to approach somebody, one, they speak at a lot of events. Typically, these people do. Approach them at an event. They're already there. They're there to be approached. You can talk to them. You know where they're going to be. But don't send them emails, give them calls, that kind of stuff, leading up to an event that they're a keynote speaker at or something like that, because they're going to be kind of busy with that. And, they're not really going to be paying attention to the outreach that you're doing when, days before a conference that they have to keynote at.
100%. I mean, I think bombarding these people is never a good plan. I think it's consistent, relentless outreach, but spaced out over time. And that's how you can really get on the map.
Yeah. More like, go to the event, find out what they drink, and buy them a drink at the there. Don't send them an email while they're at a conference or something like that. Oh, and I guess I'd also say, follow them and you like their posts and that kind of stuff. If you want to, don't go after one of these influencer people and say, I want to make a connection with this person in my industry. They're really important.
Sure.
And then not follow them, not know what they're doing, not like you said, treat them like it's a sale.
Yeah.
Because ultimately it is. It's probably bigger than a sale to get a connection with one of these people, to be able to work with them, to offer value to them. It can't back to the, sending canned messages and trying to pretend they're personal. It can't be superficial, because their time is so important. So do you have any particular tips on how, let's say somebody has a particular influencer in mind that they really want to make a connection with, on how they can approach reaching out to that person, making a connection with that person, bring value to them, that kind of stuff?
I am a bit biased here because I and Nudge, we are like 110% into warm outreach. I would say use LinkedIn or use something like Nudge to actually do relationship discovery and see if you possibly have any common connections to an influencer. Worst case, maybe try and name drop some mutual connections. I really think that treat this like a proper sales outreach. Treat them like something that really matters. I'd say that's number one is try and aim for a warm intro. Number two would be really personalize it. I think all sort of influencers they make it pretty clear the different themes that they really care about, or maybe it's based on their kind of their sponsors, their partners, or I would go and read 3, 4, 5 recent pieces of content or some of their talks, and I'd show that you actually really listen to their content, that you care about it, that you resonate with it. I think that if they know that you are really bought into what they do and really care and actually have done your research, that's going to matter and that's going to change the conversation. And maybe one more tip would be, it's kind of in the same line as the don't bug them thing or don't bug the person. But I really think that, I wouldn't try and message them more than every maybe 2-3 weeks until you actually have a relationship to start with them. And I'd maybe offer them an opportunity to offer them something first. Do you want to write a guest post for us? Or, could we just quote you in something that we're already writing? Or, do something that's already made it so easy for them to just increase their brand and get more exposure.
Right.
And I would even do a couple touches of that kind of thing before you even ask them for anything, really.
And I suppose, kind of leading off of what you said, flattery always helps. You can asking somebody to guest write, even if they don't have time for it, it's flattering even for people who are always being approached about stuff. It's still nice to know that people are interested in what you're saying, what you're doing. And that's where I like to recommend to people just to go to LinkedIn and look at somebody's profile, because most of these people, they're going to notice who looks at their profile. Now, they may have so many people looking, sometimes they don't, but if you can interact with people passively, I guess, and then it's like a mini advertisement for you, to where they start to get to recognize you and recognize your brand, and you're not so much of a stranger just coming at them once you do put yourself in front of them.
Definitely. I really think that people have this kind of grandiose idea of, I need to do this, insane amount of outreach to get in touch with an influencer, but really I think we just got to be thoughtful, calm, considerate. And it's definitely more likely they'll listen, do everything you would do to kind of get in touch with a high level prospect. Appreciate the complexity to be personalized, get a warm intro if you can. I also just think, write a few LinkedIn posts, tag that person in it, try and ask them a question, try and get in some comment threads on their own LinkedIn posts, and, get some attention. I think if they have familiarity with your name over time, and see that you've been a part of their audience, you've been a part of their content, they're far more receptive to any engagement with you.
Yeah, don't let the first time they see you be when you've given them your elevator pitch.
Exactly.
All right, I think we've hit the midway point here. We're going to go on a quick break, and then we'll be right back talking here with Jaxson Kahn more about the building buyer and influencer relationships. Great stuff, Jaxson. Looking forward to the second half of the show here. We'll be back in just a minute.
Our episode today is brought to you by Engagio. If you're thinking about ABM and not sure how to start or which plays to run, Engagio just came out with a new playbook for marketers, featuring 16 plays that have been tested in the field to get results. Check them out at engagio.com/orchestration.
All right, we're back here with Jaxson Kahn of Nudge.ai. We've been talking about building buyer and influencer relationships. Jaxson, I wanted to get back to you a little bit and kind of go over what you do over there at Nudge.ai, what you do on a day-to-day basis, kind of the marketing activities that you're involved in there.
Sure, sounds good. So at Nudge, we do a whole suite of different marketing activities. As head of marketing, my goal is to effectively oversee, I'd say primarily a mix of content, influencer marketing, public relations, community engagement, social, anything that we can do to interact with sort of our buyer audiences. Certainly, we do a few paid ads, and we definitely participate in events like the Inside Sales Summit, or often engage with the Revenue Summit, events with Sales Hacker, other things like that. We'll be at the Serious Decisions Summit next month in May, which I'm excited about. But for the most case, I think
it's always a good one.
Yeah, I'm really excited. I think in most case, what really distinguishes Nudge is content, our focus on relationships. I spend a bulk of my time really working on that. I'm lucky enough to have a great co-founder, Steve Woods, who guy's literally an author and a keynote speaker, and he's done all sorts of work there. And so we work on a lot of pieces together, and I think that that's been instrumental and really changed in the conversation for buyers. My thought around what do we do that's really differentiated at Nudge is we're really trying to take a different, I'd say, controversial tone to, where is sales at right now? We've got two different campaigns that I think are worth mentioning. One is How I Buy. How I Buy has been seen kind of all around the industry, and it's about, how are people actually buying? Which, such a flip on the head of maybe the traditional conversation. There's so many different pieces on, how can I sell better? How can I do this better? And even understanding some buyer personas, but really having people tell you in an exclusive interview series, whether that's with CTOs, CMOs, or more, about how buying has changed, about how their actual buying strategy works. We found an amazing response to this campaign. And, it's just about putting the buyer in control in that conversation. So that's one of the pieces we worked on.
I think a lot of businesses have gone out of business because they didn't pay attention to something like that, because it's just me, how do I sell, my product, and they forget that the larger side of the equation is the buyer. And as with the internet, buying in a lot of industries has changed. And when people change the way they're buying, if companies don't adjust, you're not going to be able to push people to buy the way you want them to buy, basically. So yeah, focusing on how they buy, that's a great one. I'm going to have to check that out. I haven't seen that content yet. I'm a little ashamed to say.
That's awesome. The other one is, it's called Hold the Hustle. So it's all about sales that spend too much time focused on hustle and automation, and that's actually hitting a bit of an asymptote and has some diminishing returns right now. And so we really think that relationship investment is where to go, and there's a lot of opportunity here.
And you guys have a lot of insight into that because you can use your own platform there. Exactly who you have great relationships with, who you're in front of a lot. That's always a nice thing with B2B marketing when you have a product that lends itself to the sales and marketing cycle, because you can really nail that part.
I definitely think there's a lot of interplay there, but I also think there's a huge amount of people who do get this. I think one of the most interesting examples is Drift. They've been generating a lot of conversation in the market because they want to help buyers be really in touch with the great journey that is possible, and make that very much buyer led. And so all around that, we definitely see ourselves driving sort of a wedge in the conversation about how do we focus more on relationships in addition to generating conversations. And, our whole goal is how do we shift the entire, real discussion happening back to that and really get back to basics in a way, but then merge that with the latest tech, the latest technology.
Right. Excellent. Let's shift gears here back to the kind of the influencer relationships, building those buyer and influencer relationships. I think we're really focusing more just on the influencer relationship part, which is totally fine. We've got all the time in the world in general, but maybe this episode we just focus on the influencer part, and we can have you back another time, focus on buyer or whatever you want. But it's been great. It's going great. Let's get back to that. You'd thrown out a couple names there. Brian Burns, Joe Raleigh, I think, John Burroughs. And I was thinking I was going to ask you to drop a bunch of names for people, but then I realized, and you brought it up to me in the break, that really people need to find out who are the best influencers for them. So can you share kind of some strategies on finding who these best influencers specifically for them are? I mean, there's a lot of them in B2B marketing, but you can't just go out and grab a couple names at random.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, number one, I think that maybe one of the worst indicators is Twitter followers, because you can buy those. Obviously, a lot of them are organic, but I would definitely go way deeper than that. I think sort of influencer platforms who just kind of measure that, they kind of claim they can find you the top influencers. just based on that count, I think is a bit of a stretch. I believe in at least doing some more due diligence around your audience and really understanding your buyers. I think one of the easiest, scrappiest ways to do this is go find kind of 10-year ideal or what you think are your ideal buyers, or even some of your current customers, and ask them who they're listening to.
Right.
What podcasts? What are they reading? What have they found that's been really compelling recently? Who do they kind of follow on LinkedIn? And that's one of the easiest ways to get a sense of who are the influencers. The other piece, I think,
a little market research. Yeah, nice.
Yeah, and I think one of the other pieces to think even very early on is sort of what scope you're really looking at. I think a lot of people are like, oh, influencers, I got to get Oprah Winfrey, or like literally, the top people, the celebrity and whatnot. But that's not really true sometimes. I mean, even we mentioned people like Brian Burns, Joe Rowley, some really, really top people in our industry in sales and marketing and in tech, but there's a lot of people who can influence, a whole kind of market or even whole segments, whole verticals, who maybe don't have quite the level of notoriety or even public presence, visibility sometimes, but they really do yield quite a bit of influence, whether it's on buying decisions or referrals or peers. I really think that, some people call these micro influencers, mini influencers, or whatever. My simple thought is, there's a long graph of influencers and maybe relative influence to potential cost of working with them or potential time investment needed. And sometimes you can really invest maybe a less amount of time or a less amount of money with paid engagement, and that person on the long tail may still end up yielding quite a bit of influence over your target buyer. And so I think that for a lot of folks, it's worth thinking about the scope that they're really looking at. I would widen that scope and be open to working with people who,
right,
maybe at the lower end might actually still have a lot of influence over their target buyer, or even if you're just getting started.
Yeah, they might seem like a micro influencer overall. They're not one of that. They don't have millions of Twitter followers or whatever it is. But within your target audience, they could actually have a great, a good coverage there for you. So you're saying don't go after just the biggest names out there. It makes me think of financing for startups. I've heard a lot of people say you watch things like Shark Tank, stuff like that, and people say you're not going for the money. People need the money, but you need it from the right people. And I think maybe with influencers, it's the same thing. It's not just who has the most of what the most exposure or something like that. It's got to be the right exposure to the right people, the people who are actually within your target audience and that kind of stuff.
Oh, completely. And again, based on domain or vertical or geography, you may want dramatically different people. I've used tools like, Littlebird to do a geographical analysis of influences within a certain area, simply to amplify, an event series I was doing, talking to her. That was, very helpful. There's other tools out there that are really coming up, like Dovetail. That's an influencer network and discovery platform. There are, a lot of opportunities, I'd say, to look at people who really do have influence. I mean, you can also, use more journalist tracking tools like Muckrack or things like that. I use a bit of a combination of them. And then, what I typically do without self-plugging too hard is, I usually factor all those people into CSV back into Nudge, and then that lets me set an automatic cadence to keep in touch with them. Because again, like if you're going to work with these people even once or twice, and you find that that's useful, like I would still shoot to have a longer term relationship with them, because you never know,
right,
when it's going to come back in handy. And I really think that's kind of a differentiator between just doing a bit of influencer work, a bit of influencer marketing, versus really having an influencer program, an influencer strategy.
Yeah, I guess as long as you've got something to remind you, it really doesn't take much to keep yourself a little bit warm with these people, even the people that are only occasionally going to be of use. So you mentioned a couple different MarTech solutions there. Is there anything else in particular for kind of managing influencer stuff or finding influencers for people to review that they might look into?
Yeah, I mean, Littlebird and Dovetail are a couple of the ones I mentioned I thought were pretty useful. This is another one based here called #Paid, though. Some of these ones definitely focus more on sort of consumer-based influencers. I really think that sometimes for B2B, you're going to have to do some more due diligence and digging. If you want to go a more simple route, you can certainly look up, who are the top 100 influencers in social media or sales or marketing or, pretty much whatever industry that you care about. That's one way to do it. I'll often, if they publish them in their list of Twitter accounts, I'll often like put that into an Excel sheet and then upload that somewhere so I can track them, or I will, just make sure that I've got a list of their names and then maybe try and filter it down. I do think at some point you're going to have to build a custom list of influencers, the ones who you really resonate with, the ones that you build a relationship with, the ones that are really relevant to your target buyer, target customer. I ultimately think that's kind of where you need to go, especially in B2B. And then, decide which ones of kind of those few that you may want to do a paid engagement with. I think those are the ones that you find really, really are providing kind of the most.
It's funny, in my mind, I kept asking you questions talking about this like there was one influencer for each company out there, and that's an excellent point. You do need a list of the people that you really want to be in front of, want to be talking to, want to have a relationship with, and it should be a handful of people. However many people are good for your specific industry, I guess, your specific business.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I don't think anybody should go super overboard on influencer marketing and have too many influencers there. I mean, maybe there's a way to scale this kind of program really, really well. And just keep generating more and more influencers. But I would think that influencer marketing has a strong role to play with any kind of company. But I also think that it's a limited but high influence program, and you should treat it as that. Have the key ones that you identify with, that your audience becomes very familiar with. And if you grow the program, if you scale it, I would just get deeper with kind of those influencers and don't just keep trying to through them and get new ones. It's about a long-term relationship.
Is there a number you can think of for would you tell people keep it less than 12, or is there any particular number out there as a rule of thumb for people to look for how many influencers they really want to be trying to interact with?
I think maybe 10 to 20 seems like a good one to at least track, and maybe you're kind of working with several of them on regular content. And maybe, one or two of them, you have more of a paid partnership, which is, do you actually want to co-develop programs with us? For example, Brian Burns, we work with on an actual course that we train hundreds of salespeople with. And sort of Brian took a big amount of initiative on that to work with us there. And so I think that that's something that we valued very much this year was, doing more training. So excited about that. I do think there's a lot of different opportunities for, influencers to come up with new and interesting ways to work with, with partners, with clients, with people in the industry. And, my thought is keep track of them all and see kind of what's possible, what's moving. And, I'd say a dozen or more is probably a good amount. I think when you get into that more than that, too much more than that, you may just be doing both yourself and them a disservice. These are busy people. I think it's really good to have a close, tight-knit relationship with the ones who are the most relevant, that you feel the most tied to. And likewise, it is for them too.
Yeah, you can only have so many friends. You can only have so many influencers as well, I guess. You brought up a couple times, and it's a reoccurring theme I see, and for a reason, because it's just one of these things that's true. But when you want to know what to do, check with your clients. You'd mentioned that a while back, that you want to know what influencers are in your space. You just ask your clients, and they will tell you who they're listening to, that kind of stuff. So I wanted to kind of rehash that thing that you'd kind of brought up in passing, but to put a highlight on it for people to, talking to your clients about this kind of stuff is the number one way you can really find out where you need to be, what you need to be doing is having that honest conversation with them about where do they get their information, getting back to how people buy also, how do they buy? You're just asking them flat out, how do you buy? And I think clients are great for that because you already have a relationship. So they're, if you approach somebody that's not a client and you ask them about this kind of stuff, they're not as likely to kind of give you the answers that you're looking for. Give you those honest answers.
Exactly.
So you mentioned Brian Burns. I don't want to dig in too much. I know a lot of these relationships are kind of, proprietary type stuff, but do you have any stories about any influencers, Brian, anyone else that you've worked with, any disasters, any great successes, anything just of general interest that you could share with the audience?
Yeah, I think with Brian, we've kind of seen good results from the course, people being trained up on, how to actually use relationships to grow sales, hit their quotas, close deals faster. That's all really relevant for us and what we do at Nudge and what the kind of, new modern sales that we want to build. Brian, it has an amazing podcast where, we've been able to help connect him with some great VPs of sales who are doing this model very differently. And so really excited about that and to be able to showcase, those types of people in association with him and working with him to his audience And I also think, from my perspective, there's a lot of opportunity in simply having an influencer consistently associate themselves with sort of the messages that you're bringing out. And the influencer totally has editorial control over all that. Typically with a partnership with them, I mean, they're agreeing to engage with you or help amplify your content that they already resonate with, and they typically do that based on actually looking at what you do, which is cool. I mean, I think that that's an authentic built partnership, one that really makes sense, and that's been working really well for us. One, I think, other campaign, I mean, previously at Influitive, did a lot of content where I do influencer roundups. I'd often reach out to maybe 10 influencers and do a bunch of different quotes with them in content. I think, very often those got shared a lot, really appreciated. I don't know if I can think of any disasters. Maybe not yet. Maybe I haven't tried to reach for the top yet. But
it's not good to throw influencers under the bus. Also, it feels weird. We keep saying the word influencer. It feels strange to talk about people this way. But have you ever spoke with any of these, quote unquote influencers about that label being attached to them? Do they think of themselves as influencers? Is that something that they put on their business card? How do they feel about that label?
I think, people should be skeptical about people walking around saying that I'm the biggest influencer of all time. But I think most of the ones who are really popular and really do get it typically identify themselves as, they're a podcast host, or, they're a sales leader, or, they're a coach, something like this, or they're an evangelist, right? Like, I really think that someone who's just straight up saying I'm an influencer, that's their entire brand. I mean, I think that's a bit different. Obviously, they can be recognized as influencers and things like that, but
right.
I do typically see that, people, the ones who really make it are often, have as much humility as they may have by being people who, have hundreds of thousands of followers, which is really cool. And,
so if it says influencer on their business card, they're probably more of a Kardashian influencer than a B2B influencer.
Yeah, it's very plausible. Or, I just think that there's a lot of folks on, LinkedIn sometimes who their professional job is being a LinkedIn influencer. And maybe it's just my cynic, but I'm a bit critical of that. I think that there's a bit more to doing that. I really think it's, it's all fine to kind of use social media to advance your business and amplify your goals and your mission, the opportunities and your messaging. But I do hope that we can do more than just add more noise to the market. I really do believe in, authentic messages and useful products and practical applications of all this work we're doing, especially, when there is an opportunity for so much buzz and buzzwords and things like that. And even around, the Hill AI space and everything, I think we've got a real responsibility and even an expectation to do better than that. Because there's a greater level of trust required. There's more explainability. So I really want to try and, as much as we're doing this work and we think it's important, I want to make sure that we're setting a good standard for ourselves and holding ourselves accountable to that. And so any influences that we're going to work with are very much going to do the same.
Right. I mean, I guess you point something out there that kind of, first of all, I don't want to, any influencers out there who think I'm speaking about them, first and foremost, I'm flattered that you're listening to this podcast. And then next, I'm not speaking about you. If I say anything bad, I'm speaking about other people. You don't want to get on the wrong side of somebody with a lot of followers, but it seems when you're mentioning influencers and people who that's what they do, that is their job. They list themselves as a LinkedIn influencer. You see that in a lot of industries, and it seems really dangerous because it creates this need for a cycle, and it creates this, you have to constantly be coming out with something new, so you can never really nail down this is the way to do something and move on, because they need to, it's the diet fads. There's always a new diet fad. Everybody knows there's only a couple right ways to eat, but you have to come up with a new gimmick constantly. So you see the diet people, when that's their whole life, they don't come out with a book and say, here's how I think you should diet. They come out with a new book every couple of years, with a new diet every couple of years, and they have to come up with something new. So I guess I'd say with the influencers, do you see any of that where there's influencers out there that, they keep coming up with a new fad kind of to promote because they need something new to promote? They need a new book, that kind of stuff. And is there a way to identify those kind of people? If, I guess let me try to consolidate my question down to an actual question. Would you say influencers that have something else they're tied to primarily are better influencers to look to work with? Influencers that, they have a company that they work at that isn't just being a LinkedIn influencer. Again, not talking bad about anybody who's just quote unquote, just a LinkedIn influencer, but how would you separate different types of influencers in that way, and people who are, within the industry and they speak at conferences and they're considered influencers, and people who that's their sole job is being a speaker?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's nothing wrong with kind of being a full-time thought leader in a way, but I really think, if you want to separate, the wheat from the chaff in a way, you have to simply, I think, critically evaluate a couple pieces of content they've written, see how that factors into their whole online presence, which if I only kind of see that they typically do pretty much only LinkedIn posts versus, are they publishing an ebook every once in a while? Do they have any courses? Do they do trainings? Do they move around? Do they have a good kind of engagement from their audience, a lot of comments, a lot of back and forth? Or is it all just publishing and just, leaving it there? I really think that that's what kind of shows off. And, the people who really do have the back and forth engagement, and you